Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Class 1A podcast. My name is Andrew Nimsker, and as always, alongside me, I just have Dylan Beal today to break down the newest episode where we finally get the reveal of Lady Nagant, something that we both have been very excited for a long time. And again, just seem to take the very next step in Deku's Rogue arc, which actually you and me haven't talked about, so maybe something that'll come up here in this episode as well. But outside of that, how are you enjoying the Rogue arc, and how do you like the introduction of Lady Nagant?
Good so far. It's very dark. Like, literally, it is just very dark. It's gloomy, it's rainy, but also, like, it's weird to see my hero in that, like, light. And I mean that in the very literal sense of that word, of where my hero usually is very colorful. So it's weird to see it kind of, like, washed out a little bit. But I like it. I like how the art style's a little bit different for this one, and it's a little bit darker. I'm into it.
Yeah, I did too. I think it's been phenomenal. We decided I didn't get to talk about last week too, but last week was just as great too. I'm definitely loving the tone shift. Generally, it's always kind of been with villains attacking after a sports arc, but kind of going from the war arc into this still gives that same kind of tonal shift while still keeping the action going, which has been phenomenal.
Yeah, I was really surprised though, like, because they didn't really go into like a lighthearted arc, because that's usually their MO, right? Of, like, you have the serious arc, you have the light arc, and you kind of flop back and forth. And we have a tone change from the last arc, but this one isn't like a positive tone change. It like is even darker. It's a little bit quieter, but it's even darker.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of reinforces the fact that the final act has begun. Like, as we start getting down towards the end, there's not always going to be those room for the fluff, the more fun arcs. There'll be positive moments here and there, which I still think are needed, especially in My Hero, because that's what we've kind of gotten for so long. But I don't think there's ever going to be another gentle criminal arc, just because we just don't have time for that anymore. If we're getting down there, the world's to the shit right now, so there's no more Christmas parties or nothing like that until the job's kind of done. So I hope it doesn't just keep getting darker the entire time. Like, the war arc was the last time we were ever somewhat happy, which would have been a weird way to kind of do it, but I don't think we'll ever get anything happier than the war arc, which wasn't a great time for most people. But as we've kind of done the last couple of times, as these episodes kind of get more to the point, more one topical, not doing recaps anymore. We are going to be talking about Lady Nagant. We're going to be talking about the vestiges. That's really the big things to take out of this episode. Obviously, we met them one meta-human that Deku helped out. We saw a little bit about the other crew kind of fighting villains, but not a lot. Talk about a lot, not to dissect there. So I know Vestiges came first, but I want to talk about Lady Nagant first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously a new character, someone that's been teased in the opener for a couple of weeks now. Where do you want to start? I mean, we talk about her quirk, we can talk about the backstory, even overhauls alongside her, which is really, really interesting, seeing where that's going to go.
I think the backstory. I've got to talk about a backstory because it's the most interesting part about her, because she used to be part of the Public Hero Commission. Is that what it is? Is it the right order of words?
Public
Safety Commission. Yeah. And essentially she used to be the old Hawks. Probably 2 generations. I don't know if that's like the best way to describe it, but like 2 generations, because he said like my senior person knew her. He didn't actually know her directly. And I think that's really interesting, because I think her position on the Public Safety Commission, right, revealed to her like why Hero Society is so bad. Because that's what One for All was getting to, or All for One rather. Because he mentioned like, oh yeah, like you had all these problems with Hero Society, and like again, I'm always going to talk about this every single episode until we get our ending of where they talk about Hero Society, because it's got to come up. But I think that's interesting because this is the first time I think we're seeing a hero that like is a little sympathetic who's a villain, right? Because like most of our villains are like evil for evil's sake. Most of them don't have like I'm evil, but like I kind of have a reason for it. Maybe Gentle was like the closest person. But Nagant actually probably has a real reason. We know that like they had Hawks doing shady stuff, so we can only assume that she had to do shadier things, which her getting so disillusioned and like slipping into villainy is so interesting to me. Like, I want to see why. Like, what act of villainy did she actually commit? Is she a full-on villain now? Is she just gonna like dome this kid in the middle of like a rainy street right now?
Yeah, it definitely kind of feels like there's definitely going to be more. The killing your own hero, like that's kind of a line that was dropped in this episode when talking to All for One. And I definitely think we're going to learn more about that at some point. I think they wouldn't just have a hero killing another hero without kind of giving a little more on that. And she doesn't feel as much as a villain as someone that's just kind of doing what she's ordered, what she thinks is best for her. Probably kind of exactly what happened at the Public Safety Commission. I mean, All for One made a good point. She was locked up in Tartarus, the worst of the worst. She was clearly never getting out. So hero kind of society falling to the wayside is good for her. So I don't necessarily think that she wants to follow. I don't think she's necessarily evil, but I think she's a very big person of opportunity at this point. And if she has to kill one high schooler to be able to live the rest of her life free, I think she has been pushed to that point where she can kind of do that. So again, I agree that I think there's more of reasoning behind what she does, and I think she's more morally gray than dark, because she's not doing this out of anger. She's doing it kind of out of necessity, which I think makes more sense as a kind of morally gray assassin than a villain like Muscular that we saw last week that is doing it just to do it.
So, all right, given her position, would you kill Deku?
Absolutely. If my options are being locked up for the rest of life or killing one more person after I've probably killed hundreds for the safety commission, I kill one more. At that point, what's another one to an assassin? I mean, we saw Hawks kill at least one or two people in the small snippets we've seen. Imagine he's done a lot more or been told to do a lot more. So I'm sure he's in the same exact boat. And once you kind of get to that point, you can just kind of turn off your mind, do what has to get done, and move on. Would you?
Would I kill Deku? Absolutely. I would kill Deku. Would I kill a random 14-year-old? Okay.
Point.
I don't know. Yeah.
Exactly.
I will say the one thing I found deeply interesting from like maybe a storytelling perspective is how they revealed her quirk. Like it being a like interview with Snipe that Deku is remembering. That's like a 10 out of 10 right there. Like, come on. It's just perfect. It literally is such a perfect way to reveal that. Like, I don't know. Like I literally clapped for Horikoshi when I read that.
It's such a better way than, I mean, obviously Deku kind of monologued some of the ability anyways, but it's still just such a much more fun way to learn about something, especially since she was a hero at one point. It makes sense that Deku would know about her because he was a huge stan, that there'd be interviews about her, especially if she was so good. It makes so much sense for there to be interviews talking about her. So using that snippet, I thought was phenomenal as well. I loved it. And it just added a little bit more depth than us kind of seeing it. Obviously, when we see a sniper coming out of someone's arm, we could have started putting pieces together, but having explained in that way and just going on is such a better way of doing it.
Yeah. It also just made me miss Snipe, though. I miss the teachers. There were some really good teachers, too.
There were some good teachers that we got no time with. Yeah, like the USJ and then like the final exams are literally the only time we ever saw them.
Yeah, it was super, super quick.
But again, this is always something that's interesting to me of like where you draw a line of like one quirk. So not only is she able to make a literal rifle out of her arm, which seems like its own individual quirk, but her body was also like manipulated in a way that her hair can also be used as bullets. Like I know they go together, but it just feels like two such different abilities that like it almost sounds like her hair doesn't have to be molded into a bullet. Like she molds it into a bullet, but it's like a putty-like material that she can make more out of, which seems like a whole different quirk. We know it's one and the same because she's had it forever. But that just always is interesting to me of how far a single quirk can stretch.
Yeah, I think that there's probably this like unspoken rule in making like quirks and stuff like that, or just even superpowers in general, that like some things are like a system, like some powers are like a system of things that are just like kind of serendipitously like working together. And sometimes it's just like, yeah, I'm just like really strong, right? Where it's very clear cut. And this is one of those where it's like, I just assume rifle has like two kind of components that at some way you could probably explain it away of like, okay, well, yeah, like technically her arm has like a little bit of this putty stuff that allows her to do something. But yeah, just kind of take it all in as one kind of system. I love the idea for the hair stuff, though.
Yeah, it is easy to accept. Like, I'm not questioning it. Like, wow, it's just something that goes. Like, I can't think of a different situation where there's two such major parts to a quirk. I might be just missing something clearly, but a lot of what we've seen is straightforward. Todoroki shoots ice and fire. Bakugo makes explosions. Like that'd be like Bakugo making explosions, but then his hair could also be used as like TNT. Like that makes sense in a way because they're kind of one and the same. But like
but
this is the first time we've seen something
bit.
so extreme. Yeah. So I love it though. It definitely adds to it and it makes her a better one than just pulling bullets out of her pocket or doing the hair twist as she's like talking. I thought it was a really cool kind of scene and then pulling it in there and all that. I loved how it works. I just love that we have no idea of how quirks really work because this is the first time we've seen something like that.
Yeah, I would really love to see like like this fight be like extended out and like she's like kind of running low on her hair or something. Or just like to
grow
talk
back
about that
instantly. Does she go bald during really big fights?
Exactly.
Engagements? Like a lot of questions.
I like her quirk though. I also like I like her color scheme, like her theming of just like the way she looked because like we're in like a really dark because we're talking about like a really like dark time in My Hero, but like her colors still like kind of pop a little bit too, and I think it's cool. I really like it.
Yeah, it was a really interesting color theme to kind of do for an assassin. Obviously, you'd think someone would be a little bit less obvious for that, but I love everything about the character design from the quirk to her appearance, hair colors, all that. So I think that works really well. And I think I just want to know more about where this is all going to go because obviously it feels like it's a fight to the death, but introducing a character like this with her unique backstory. She also was like the first person we've really seen get a quirk from All For One. And seeing what exactly that's going to tail. Like, it feels like a character that's set up to only last for an episode or two. I mean, it looks like she's going to be a character that's only here for an episode or two, but I feel like they're setting her up for something bigger. So I don't know exactly how that comes to be, especially with Overhaul, because there's no way that arc in her internal character can come to a conclusion here. So really interested to see what happens.
What is going on with Overhaul? Like, what is she going to use him for? He has no arms, so he can't use his quirk anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, in theory, because I always thought it was anything he touches, he can take apart. So does that have to be his hands?
I didn't think about that too much. Like, yeah, I wonder, like, if he like, he gets those toes out and like puts them on you, will that just like disintegrate you, or
you can headbutt someone? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to it, but that's really, with Overhaul being a part of that, is where I really kind of saw her more as a morally gray with some good left in her, because there really isn't anything she can use it for. Before All For One told her who he was, no idea that he had like kind of mafia connections, which maybe an assassin or someone trying to rebuild their life would have used, but she didn't know that. She has no idea what his quirk is, just that he was locked up in there. Like, I think she was doing it because she pitied him. And I think that's the whole reason he's still along with there too. So I don't know if something's going to come out of it. But I don't think she has a plan for him. I think she literally just pities him and doesn't know what else to do at this point. Kind of like, stuck with a stray dog and now you're just dealing with it.
Yeah, and he's mind broken at this point too.
Yeah, which is too bad. Like, we kind of got an idea that he was just broken at the end of the arc we saw him, but seeing him at the state he's at now, especially with how much I loved Overhaul, I'd like some kind of redemption in some way. I don't know what exactly that could possibly look like, but it'd be sad if he died or the story ended seeing him here, like that brought him out of Tartarus for no reason, just for him to say pops over and over again for 2 or 3 episodes, and then he just gets locked back up. I hope it's more than that, but there's a lot going on. I could very much see that happening.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing about Nagant is really why or what's going to go on with this quirk from All For One. I think obviously sending her after Deku, I mean, obviously you need all the help you can get, so I think that makes sense too. But the bigger thing is the only time we've really seen someone in the actual show get multiple quirks is one, Deku, and we learned about overflowing glasses and all of that and what can happen there. And now Nagant, which she was given the additional airwalk one. So what do you think is going to happen there? I mean, obviously we know, like with the previous holders, they live to 40. So I don't think she's just going to blow up tomorrow because she has 2 quirks in her body now. But we also know that quirks aren't meant to be traded like that, that it should have some kind of toll on her, or what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, so the way I imagine like the cup analogy is more of like instead of like a cup, I like assume it as like a barrel with pressure, and like the more quirks that you put onto it, the more pressure that it gets until one point it just bursts. So that's the way I like kind of view out of it, because that makes more sense to me when you think about stacking quirks within each other. Of like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that One for All has such a such a low lifespan because you're putting so many quirks into one, right? That is just eventually you're not going to be able to hold them all. My view with two quirks, so having like one additional one, is that like maybe you can kind of just hold on to it for a little bit and it probably shortens your life, but like probably still live to like 80, like 70 or 80 or so.
Yeah,
But it
and
probably puts
society's a mess
yeah.
right now anyway, so I don't think she's really thinking too much of, even if she knew that was that outcome, who knows if she even would make it that far at this point.
Yeah, I wonder like, like what does she think about it? Like, I guess it's a little bit tough because she's part of the Hero Public Safety Commission, so it's a little bit different. But like, what would the average person think about someone with two quirks? Like, how deep into quirk science are like the general populace?
Yeah, but like in Japan, like you know that this man is an exception, all for one, like the only one that ever really stood up for, and one for all, the only one that
Yeah.
ever really stood up for to All Might. Like obviously he's above the thing. We've seen him use all these different quirks. Like I think to the average person, they would just think he's an exception. So getting a quirk from someone that has 3,000 quirks, I don't think I think too much about that. Like obviously this
Mm,
man is just like a god among quirks. So I don't think I would think anything of it. Like, oh, he can just take and give quirks as he is. Like that's what his quirk is. So I don't know. I don't think I'd think too much about it. There's no reason to. And it's not like he gives them out left and right and people can see the everyday repercussions of them, because we haven't
that's
really
true.
seen it
Yeah.
happen up to this point, because he's been locked up and hidden for years. So no one really knows what happens when this happens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true because we never really saw like any of the ramifications of having too many quirks with anybody besides the One for All,
Which was
the One
still
for All
like
pet
6
systems.
quirks instead of
Yeah,
1. Because he
yeah,
was the 4th or 5th user, so he had a bunch of them stockpiled. And again, even living to 40, he just died in sleep, I'm pretty sure. He didn't explode or anything like that. Like, guy got 2 quirks and died at 70 instead of 90. Like, he just died of natural age. Like, I don't think there's anything
huh?
like that. So, I don't know. It's still very interesting because we just talked like 2 episodes ago about what multiple quirks can do to a body. And now facing our first person that has had a quirk put into their body, I think that timing is very interesting, because
Yeah,
like that being back to back feels like there should be some kind of connection, but maybe it's just some kind of reasoning of why Deku's the last one and trying to push him to save himself, and it just happened to be where the story led.
hmm yeah, yeah, it makes sense to me too.
So, anything else on Nagant? I think the other thing we want to talk about quickly is vestiges, but
No,
um,
let's talk about the messages.
so I think again, not too much besides the fact that we now know that the last 2 vestiges are kind of willing to help. And really where their hesitation was is that they went through, right as All for One kind of rose to power and went through the darkest timeline. So they're a little bit more jaded. They've seen more shit, as you can see by the giant scar on the one dude's face. But they didn't like the idea that Deku was trying to save their arch nemesis. And that really came from where their hesitation was. Is that how you took that too?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking there. And yeah, it makes sense because that was like the grand ultimate evil version of him.
Yeah, it's like going through World War II and then like a couple years later, it's like, oh no, we want to save them. Like, no, that's not how this works. Like, I'm not going to help people that just ruin the world around me. Like, no, I'm going to look out for myself and I want to put an end to that. Like, I don't blame them in that. But also at some point, you have to say, like, okay, but let's help out for the greater good, because it's better to
Hmm.
put an end to it one way or the other than not at all. Um, but I'm right, they have to be good. Like, right, we've kind of seen like a lot of these quirks are like tools in a tool belt, but like these 2 have to be sick as fuck, right? Like I think that was a real story reason why they held back. They're gonna be cool, they're gonna be game changing, you think, or no?
Yeah, and okay, I'm gonna say it. We talked about this last week too, but the one guy does look like Bakugo,
He
and
does.
he has like a big arm thing too, like only one big arm thing, but he still has a big arm thing. Like he has a
Give
spiky
Deku a
hair,
reason.
and
Give him something. Like just let him
yes,
shoot something out of his body besides Black Whip. Like that's all I want.
yeah. Like my thinking behind these is like we've gotten the big punch, right, and we've gotten a bunch of things to support it. I'm sure that there's like got to be like another like attack move, right? We get another attack move. So like this is the move of like, here's my grand ultimate thing that's going to finally defeat, All for One.
Something
That's what I
longer range,
assume.
because like we know he can't really get up and close and personal. Like 'cause that's how he loses his quirks. Or
Yes,
something to help
the
with
person
that.
has the thing on their arm. It could be a big beam shot, like Mega Man cannon.
So really interested where that is. Off that doesn't lead anything. I think we might get a reveal of one of the quirks in the battle against Lady Nagant. Obviously, it's kind of a higher opponent than what he's seen. And obviously, they just made a big deal about them joining and saying, okay, let's do this all together this episode. So I don't know if we see both, but maybe one of them in the next couple episodes, or do you think Deku needs more time than just instantly using them?
I think we get one instantly, and then I think we save one until whenever the final battle is. I think that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, so it'll be really interesting where it is. Because, yeah, it would make sense if, like, okay, this next one's a weapon, and the last one's, like, a mega support kind of power that ties it all together. Like, okay, like, now we have all these things, but this last quirk is going to allow all of us to use it in unison or something kind of like that.
Yeah, and it's going to be all for nothing and erase all quirks.
Yep, great. I'm in. I don't know how else you end the story at this point, so I think that's probably the best outcome. So good luck with that pitch. But yeah, anything else in the vestiges? I think the big thing is what's next, but I think we'll learn next episode. I think a lot of the questions we have asked this episode are going to be answered next week, so I don't think it's worth much digging into much deeper. Do you?
No, I think it's probably time for one of the hardest parts of this episode.
Plus Ultra, the weekly award where we decide each and every week who went beyond and who went Plus Ultra. Dylan, where are you going to go this week? We didn't really have many big moments here. A lot of setup.
Yeah, a lot of setup. It's a little bit tough. So here's my candidate for it. My candidate is just going to be Deku. And it is Deku because he caught a fucking bullet. Just straight up caught a bullet when it was shot at him. They went over that part really fast. Now, I assume her gun maybe doesn't shoot as fast as maybe a normal gun.
I mean, it's a rifle. I'm assuming it's going pretty damn fast. Like, it's still got to be going.
Yeah, it's still got to be going. And Deku just straight up just, like, caught that thing. So I think he deserves it because that's kind of insane.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, between that and saving the girl at the beginning, I mean, obviously that's kind of what Deku's job is at this point, but...
Try to get it to someone else. Try.
I can't. I mean, again, hasn't done anything that cool yet. Maybe kind of standing up against All for One for a second there and like saving Overhaul, but we haven't seen enough that come to conclusion yet.
Let's swap. You take mine because I can think of another one.
All right. Well, let's hear it then. I'll go with Deku.
How am I allowed to speak something very cursed into existence?
No. Yeah.
All right, the real Plus Ultra winners of this episode were all the degenerate furries out there who got their weird big Animorph character finally put in this show. This character's cursed. I hate her.
What?
The fandom on. Yeah, I don't like her. I like her normally, but the fandom online's they're too. I don't like them. I don't like what they.
I haven't seen the fandom too much. Were they very hyped for this week, like knowing that she was coming or something?
No, there's just a weird subgroup who's just too into this character. They went Plus Ultra because they got their week. Let's just hope we never hear from them again.
Oh, right. I guess we'll accept that as the answer because it can't be a place thing or idea. I do say that every single time, so I guess we will go with the idea of this time. But that'll be all for this week's episode of the Class 1A podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll be back next week to wrap up the conclusion of the Lady Nagant fight and hopefully a lot more. Thank you all for listening and watching, and we'll see you all then.